So, you can't be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. That's the message from Sir Keir Starmer to Boris Johnson following the release of the Sue Gray report.
Despite doubling down on calls for the PM to resign, the Labour leader still faces an investigation of his own into alleged COVID rule breaking. And we're now joined by the Shadow Minister for Levelling Up, Lisa Nandy. Good to speak to you this morning.
Good morning.
Yes, there is a lot of outrage, a lot of concern. I'm sure, in a lot of course, a lot of disgust at some of the details in that report. But actually, not a flood of letters going in to the 22 committee to call for his resignation. Not a massive change in the polls in terms of trust of Boris Johnson or indeed increased trust of Keir Starmer. So here he is today, his government announcing, hopefully, a cost of living crisis saving. Is that now going to become the focus and we all move on?
Well, look, I'd love to move on. I'd love to see the government focusing on dealing with the cost of living crisis that's affecting most families and businesses in this country at the moment, and Russian aggression in Ukraine. But the trouble is that, as this report lays bare, there is a rot in government, and the rot starts from the top. That the Prime Minister presided over a culture in which people felt that it was absolutely fine to have bring-your-own-bottle parties, garden parties, leaving parties, celebration parties, suitcases of wine smuggled through the back door of Downing Street. There were fights, there were people being sick, there were people being told to leave by the back door to avoid the gaze of the press, even as senior ministers and the Prime Minister himself were going out and standing in front of the public saying, don't go into care homes, don't go into hospitals, don't say goodbye to loved ones, because we're all in this together. And if you can't trust him when he says that he tells the truth, how can you trust him when he says he's going to deal with the cost of living crisis and get help to families?
You're absolutely right, Lisa. You're absolutely right. But we've heard that. We've heard you say that. We've heard many people say that. And we're going to be speaking to somebody in a moment who is one of those relatives that lost somebody, wasn't able to say goodbye, and went through the horror that you're describing. And no doubt, it's awful. Everybody knows it's awful, including, if you believe the apologies, Boris Johnson. But it doesn't seem to be any sign of any change or any charge for Labour to take over.
Well, that is up to Conservative MPs, and if Conservative MPs won't act, then ultimately it's going to be up to the public to make their decision about what they want the Prime Minister to do. I thought it was really striking yesterday that, with a few very honourable exceptions, most Conservative MPs seem to be weighing up a calculation about whether they personally would be better off with Boris Johnson continuing in office or not. None of this conversation in the Conservative Party seems to be about what is in the interests of the country. There are only a few people who've actually done the right thing and called for him to go. The Prime Minister himself says he takes personal responsibility, but the truth is he's let some junior civil servants take the rap for a culture that he led, that he presided over, and shown that he isn't fit to lead this
Lisa
country.
Nandy, what about the argument that those politicians will say, look, the Met Police have investigated all these things. They've drawn a line under it, said there's nothing more going to be investigated. It's had a police investigation. They can turn around and say, look, if the Met Police are happy, I'm happy. I'm going to carry on getting on doing the job that I need to do, which is working for my constituents wherever they are.
Well, I mean, the Met Police aren't happy. The Met Police fined the Prime Minister for breaking his own laws. So we're in a
but
fairly...
they're happy to say there were no more laws broken by the Prime Minister. He was only ever issued with the one fixed penalty. And it's one too many for many people, understandably, but there weren't more. He wasn't found guilty of any others.
But we're in an extraordinary situation as a country where you cannot trust a word that the Prime Minister says. I don't remember a time in my lifetime where we've been in that situation. This is not a party political point. I can't imagine that this would have happened if Theresa May was Prime Minister. I can't imagine it would have happened when David Cameron was Prime Minister. It is unprecedented, and that's why senior Conservative figures like John Major, former Prime Minister, have come out and said this cannot be allowed to stand. Trust is the glue that holds this country together. You have to trust that your representatives will behave with honour and integrity, especially at a time when the whole country has to act in step together in order to get through what has been the biggest crisis in my lifetime.
Do you have trust?
You cannot trust a word that this Prime Minister says. That is a major problem facing this country.
Do you have trust in the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and this and the steps that he's taking, he's going to be announcing a little bit later on. Finally, a windfall tax on some of the energy companies, and hopefully a doubling of the support that we've already seen for people struggling with their bills.
I hope so. The Chancellor and Prime Minister have said for months now that it is out of the question to introduce a windfall tax, and they now seem to finally have been dragged kicking and screaming to do this. I hope that what we see today is money, £200 we've calculated you could knock off everybody's energy bills to get help to everybody right now, but targeted help at those who most need it, up to £600 for those most in need. If he does what we've been suggesting, not only do you do that, but by cutting the VAT off energy bills, you would also help to deal with soaring inflation rates in this country that are affecting families and businesses. I hope that's what we're going to see from the Chancellor today, finally, and we'll be looking closely at what he suggests to see whether it goes far enough.
OK, Lisa Nandy, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.